The world's unluckiest mansions might look innocent enough from the outside, but don't be fooled by their appearances. Seemingly jinxed for generations, these ill-scarred properties have brought nothing but trouble and strife to the innocent residents. So let's go ahead and uncover the shocking stories behind these haunted mansions. Up first, we go to Dunn Hall in Connecticut. This Jacobean-style mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut was built in 1918 for industrialist Daniel G. Reed, who gave it to his daughter Ray as a wedding gift. According to the Associated Press, the house cost $1 million at the time, which is equivalent to about $20 million in today's money, and was absolutely brimming with splendor. The best house in the part of Connecticut. Sadly, the nightmares began not long after the completion of the 23-room manse. Reed's mental and physical health deteriorated from 1919 onwards. 1928 edition of the San Francisco Chronicle printed that he had developed a serious opiate addiction. The metals magnate spent huge sums of money in a bid to get better, but to no avail. He died in 1925 at the age of 66. Reed's daughter passed away in 1947 at an even younger age, dying at 61 from pneumonia, and this trend continued throughout the years. Dunn was sold in 1950 to steel tycoon Loring Washburn, who subsequently lost his entire fortune. In 1963, the mansion was seized by a finance company, laying empty until 1967, when another unfortunate millionaire, Miss Gregg Sherwood Dodge Moran, snapped it up. A former showgirl and ex-wife of the heir to an enormous automobile fortune. She sold the manse after a year. Her life went rapidly downhill, accumulating in bankruptcy and conviction for stealing, while her husband also took his own life. The next owner, an investor, was indicted on larceny and fraud charges, dying in 1974 before the case had gone to trial at the age of just 46. His widow compared Dunn to the cursed Hope Diamond, according to the reports. The next millionaire to hold the deeds, Indian oil tycoon Ravi Thakur, ended up filing for bankruptcy. In 1983, he sold Dunn and its contents to the Queen of the Mean, real estate mogul Leona Helmsley, and her husband Harry for $32 million in today's money. Here's a pic of the revamp and what they spent their fortune on. The Helmsleys also fell victim to the curse, with Leona eventually imprisoned for false accounting and tax evasion. Following her death in 2007, Dunn was sold again and underwent a major refurb, but the curse persisted. The mansion was listed in 2014 for $65 million and didn't sell until 2020, when the price was slashed to $16.5 million. Here's hoping that the current owner has better luck. Up next, we go to Castello da Cunha. Construction on this fantastic castle in Portugal's northern Braga region began in 1915. It was commissioned by Jose Ferreira and his wealthy Brazilian wife. Swiss architect Ernest Carradi designed the pad in fabulous and hodgepodge of styles from Gothic and Renaissance, but the project hit the skids when Rigo separated in 1919. According to some sources, Francisca infuriated the parish priest with the many parties she threw and her refusal to cover up from head to toe, which was expected of respectable ladies at the time. As the story goes, tensions with the clergymen came to a head in the 1930s, and Francisca escaped to Brazil, having divorced another husband. But before leaving Portugal, she is said to have cursed the castle, vowing it would never be finished or lived in. Whether this local legend is true or not, her hex appears to have been held over the decades. In 1938, the unfinished castle was bought by English aristocrat, but it's unclear whether he actually resided there. The next owner, Alberto Torres, a bookkeeper from a wealthy count, and also an owner further down the line, Francisco Macedo, pressed ahead with construction work, removing original features including exquisite tiles and wooden interiors. The crumbling mansion is said to have been completed in 1991, but the curse still holds more or less, as the project wasn't finished as planned. The locals say Princess Diana was interested in buying the castle not long before her death in 1997, as reported by Portuguese media company. As for residents, to date, nobody appears to have actually lived in the property, which has been passed through several owners since. Up next, we go to Balrow Mansion in Pennsylvania. According to local legend, this 32-room mansion in Philadelphia's upscale Chestnut Hill neighborhood was built in or around 1911 by a carpenter who went on to murder his wife. In 1926, the property was bought by Major May Esby of the storied Esby family, who traced their ancestry back to the 12th century Yorkshire and immigrated to America abroad the welcome way back in 1683. Shortly after the family moved into the mansion, the Major's son Stephen died at the age of only 11. The story of the house's haunted past is explored in the book Haunted Philadelphia, Famous Phantoms, Sinister Sights, and Lingering Legends. His brother George, who ultimately inherited the property, revealed that a few weeks before his death, the boys were playing in the garden when they stopped to look at the fountain. Disturbingly, Stephen's face appeared on the water's surface as a skull, which totally freaked them out. Things get a whole lot creepier from here. Stephen's ghost has appeared to several people over the years aside from George, and has even been spotted by the current owner's wife and two of the couple's friends. The duo is convinced they saw a blonde-haired boy walking around the house, while the owner's partner said she caught the child's reflection in a mirror, then turned around and discovered he vanished. A hotbed of paranormal activity, the mansion is also said to be haunted by George's mother, Henrietta, while Thomas Jefferson apparently lurks in the dining room, and the ghost of the first owner's wife has threatened terrified visitors with her cane. Strange noises, random power cuts, and objects being moved by an invisible force suggest that a poltergeist is in the residence too. The scariest part of the house has got to be the infamous Blue Room, home of the Chair of Death. This cursed antique is said to have been crafted by a warlock in the 18th century and was once owned by Napoleon. Sitting on it isn't advisable, since those who have done so are said to have died within 2 weeks, victims of the malevolent spirit called Amelia or Amanda that haunts the chair. The local historical society has linked 4 deaths to the dreaded piece of furniture before it was reassuredly roped off, including one of George's cousins. Up next, we go to Dundis Castle in New York. Dundis Castle, aka Craig E. Clare, lies deep in the Catskill Mountains of Roscoe, New York. Cloaked in sadness, the so-called Castle of Sorrows conceals a particularly heart-wrenching history. The medieval-style residence was commissioned by wealthy New Yorker Ralph Wirtz Dundas in the late 1910s, but he died in 1921 before its scheduled completion, leaving his wife and daughter behind. According to the Beaverkill Friends group, Wirtz Dundas' widow Josephine was committed to an asylum 1 year later, and the half-finished property passed on to the couple's daughter. The family's awful luck continued when she was duped out of her inheritance. The daughter eventually moved to England, where her mental health quickly deteriorated, and like her mother, she was packed away to an asylum where she ended her days. The castle remained unfinished. Morell's estate sold the property in 1949 to the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the Masonic Order. It was used as a Masonic retreat and a holiday camp until the 1970s, and then it was largely abandoned. The castle has sat empty ever since. In fact, nobody has ever lived in the cursed residence. According to local legend, Josephine's ghost haunts the castle. Some say her figure was cruelly locked away in a room and after she became mentally unstable, but there's no evidence that this ever happened. It's also said that the water in the ponds on the castle grounds turn to blood when the moon is full. Fortunately, things are looking up for the Castle of Sorrow, with a happier future on the cards. The property is reportedly undergoing an extensive makeover and is set to open as a luxury hotel. So let's keep our fingers crossed that the reinvention finally breaks the curse that has affected this place for years. Up next, we go to Elda Castle in New York. Elda Castle in New York was built in 1927 by David T. Abercrombie, the co-founder of Abercrombie & Fitch, which started out as a very high-end clothing line. Featuring turrets and arched windows and whimsical courtyards, the medieval-inspired 25-room marvel was simply magical on its completion. According to the report in the New York Times, Abercrombie named the castle after the first letters of the names of his children, Elizabeth, Lucy, David, and Abbott. Bad fortune struck the family as soon as they moved there. In 1929, 30-year-old Lucy was killed in an explosion at her father's factory. The grief-stricken gentleman outfitter passed away 2 years later at 64, while his son David Jr. died in 1937, and he was only 35. The American castle boasts a grand great room, shown here in its heyday following her husband's death. Abercrombie's widow sold the property to a paint research company, but after the Second World War, the castle was left vacant and frequently targeted by vandals. The Herrick Scientific Company president James Herrick bought the rundown property in 1964 for the equivalent of just $140,000 and set about restoring it, but he died in the 1990s before he could complete the project. Subsequent owners, who have included J.P. Morgan Heir, have attempted to finish the restoration and revive the property, but all attempts to breathe some life into the Elda Castle have been met with failure. A magnet for bad luck, the crumbling property last sold in 2011 for $3.8 million to a mysterious trust that has left it vacant. No doubt eager to offload the cursed property, the trust put it back on the market in 2017 with an asking price of $3.7 million. The property was subsequently dropped to $3.1 but failed to attract a buyer, and as if things couldn't get any worse, in 2022, the property was gutted by a devastating fire which ripped through all 5 floors, adding to the castle's cursed reputation. Amazingly, the property is still for sale right now for $2.9 million. Up next, we go to Venice Grand Canal's cursed palazzo. Poised on Venice's Grand Canal, one of the world's most famous waterways, this extraordinary 15th century palazzo has just hit the market for $19 million. The The storied residence is steeped up in over 540 years of history and is shrouded in a mysterious and somewhat infamous past. A prized piece of the Renaissance architecture, the lucky buyer will also take on a rumored curse that has befallen on almost all of the plaza's previous owners. So let's go ahead and take a deeper look. Construction on the palace began in 1479 on the orders of Giovanni Dario, a merchant, diplomat, and secretary to the Venetian Senate. Dario was crowned a local hero after negotiating an important peace treaty and economic agreement with the Ottomans, who controlled parts of Central Europe until the late 17th century. They even nicknamed him the savior of the homeland. And they also gave him a large sum of money, and with the cash he decided to build this amazing home. Soaring up 4 floors, it offers 10,800 square feet of inside space, including 8 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms. When Dario passed away in 1484, he left the residence to his daughter, Marietta, and her husband Vincenzo, a spice merchant. This is when the alleged curse begins. After Vincenzo's business failed, he was reportedly stabbed to death. Marietta passed away soon after too. Some sources claim she took her own life, while others say her passing was due to a heart attack. The house passed to the couple's son, who is said to have been killed by assassins in an ambush in Crete. In the 19th century, the Barbaro family sold the palace to Abdul, a precious stone merchant. He reportedly immediately lost all his wealth and was forced to sell the property for only $600 to an English historian named Rawdon Brown. Sadly, Brown didn't fare any better, and 4 years after getting the keys, he was left bankrupt and forced to sell. The property then passed from one owner to another owner with increasing frequency, and unfortunate events befell on all who lived there. The palace is also said to have been able to strike from a distance. In 1964, Mario Delmonico wanted to buy the place. However, he had a serious car accident on the way to the viewing. Luckily, he survived, but the incident triggered a change of heart about purchasing the property. A few years later, in the 1970s, the plaza was purchased by Count Filipino de Lanz, who was killed inside the walls by his lover. So how could one house be so unlucky? According to local legend, many believe the palace was built on the site of the Knights of Templar cemetery, while others think that the building that previously occupied the land must have been the scene of an evil occurrence. Overflowing with ornate Gothic architecture, the palace is richly decorated with marble and boasts grand European fireplaces, elaborate columns, and timbered doors, beam ceilings, and many more amazing features. With that being said, the age of the home's construction is apparent, with the structure leaning slightly to the right due to subsidence. And after all, it was built over order. Alright everyone, I think that's going to wrap this video up. Like I mentioned in the beginning, follow all my social media, and also 50% of the people who watch me don't subscribe. So just, if you're watching, just click the subscribe button. It's free, it means a lot. And then an alternative option would be to become a member, which costs a couple dollars, but then, you know, I'll be calling you guys, FaceTiming you guys. You get cool badges, you get exclusive videos. I'll be making videos that I can't show, like public channel. So you guys get a ton of cool features and by clicking here and becoming a member. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I love you guys. Thank you for the constant support. Feel free to share this video on anything, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.